Hello, my name is Amy White. For this week's discussion thread, Information Literacy, I will be discussing the Atlantic System, slavery in the Americas. Both before and after the Revolutionary period in the colonies in the U.S., respectively, there were hundreds of newspaper notices and articles regarding slavery, printed up and down the Atlantic coast, all of which boasted the slave trade known as the triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. In the 1700s, 90% of the population of the West Indies were slaves. Between slaves, there were masters, a small minority of estate managers, government officials, artisans, and small farmers, nearly all white. Only 2 to 3% of the slaves were house slaves, and 70% of those slaves were working in the fields under various occupations. I have one of many examples of an article about the sale of slaves. This notice appeared in Charleston, South Carolina on February 3rd, 1768, entitled The Sale of Negroes, which gives a time and a place of the sale of these slaves under the ownership of Mr. John Miles, and gives a short description of those people to be sold. It says 70 Negroes, all seasoned, young and healthy, most of them born in this country, among whom are coopers, sawyers, house wenches, and boys and girls, and all others, very good field slaves. Now, this describes the slaves in their trained positions primarily, but also the reference to seasoned meant that the slave had essentially lived in the United States or in the Americas for about a year or so and acclimated, as they said, to the region, the climate, the new reality that they are slaves, and for many of them had endured some kind of Western illness that they hadn't had immunity to from their African heritage. This all demonstrates the true horrors of slavery and the dehumanizing tone of the notice itself, that this is property to be sold and not people. So that's an important aspect of this time period. During this period, the U.S. was a majority Christian region. The colonists, and soon as Americans, they had this morality factor that conflicted with the institution of slavery, and questions were often raised on a public platform concerning this. In this pamphlet entitled An Epistle of Caution and Advice, it was printed and sold by Mr. James Chatton in 1754 and written by the Society of Friends, where they really appeal to the audience's morality regarding the institution of slavery. On page 3, they say, "How then can we who have been concerned to follow the gospel of universal love and peace among mankind be so inconsistent with ourselves as to purchase such who are prisoners of war and thereby encourage this anti-Christian practice?" They go on to discuss the morality of stripping children from their parents and focusing really on, is this really living a moral Christian life? They go on even further through the pamphlet to really ask important questions to their readers. And the tone of this is really important, given that the Declaration of Independence and aspects of liberty would be occurring in about 20 some years. And they ask, do we act consistent with this noble principle who lay such heavy burdens on our fellow creatures as slaves? Do we consider that they are called and sincerely desire that they may become heirs with us in glory, that they too become Christians? And rejoice in liberty of the sons of God, whilst we here on earth are holding them from the common liberties of mankind, because slavery strips them of all freedoms, including liberty. It is clear that this is a religious and moral plea to those who are reading the pamphlet, and it takes on the institution of slavery and the morality of it. This is a clear plea for people to rethink this practice. And it is another reinforcing cry that other abolitionists like William Wilberforce and Thomas Clarkson are professing during this time against slavery. And really just provoking these other people to think about the institution and their practices. Overall, I really think these primary sources demonstrate the callousness of slavery and the moral outcry that is occurring so early in this nation's history, demonstrating that there's always two sides to an argument. And despite the fact that the institution of slavery continued for more than another half century, it is evident that the tenders of the abolitionist movement was being laid in this country. I hope that you found this information useful, and I look forward to hearing from you in the comments below. I hope you all have a great day, and thank you very much for listening.